Hi everyone. We are back with another session of Mellow Musings. And today there are these four young men. Three of them you can see on the screen. The fourth is somewhere behind, but he'll be back soon. So we have these three young men who will be holding the fort. Yes, there is the fort. And yeah, doesn't he make an impact? Okay, so we are going to have a very interesting session today, and I'm going to request Neeraj Pizar, who is an associate professor at Ishtiaque University. He is going to set the ball rolling. Over to you, Neeraj. The rest of
Thank you.
us will keep ourselves muted and the videos off. And after this, the conversation is over, then we'll come back for a nice discussion. All right, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Mellow Musing. Today, we are delighted to have with us two young and very talented scholars who will be leading the discussion. The title of today's session is From Slopes to Sips, a journey through Darjeeling tea and terrain. The format will remain the same as our previous sessions. We will begin with a discussion of about 35 to 40 minutes, followed by an open floor for questions and interaction. A gentle reminder to all attendees, except for speaker and the moderator, please keep your audio and video turned off during the session. Before handing over the virtual platform to our moderator for the session, Dr. Subham Amin, who will be introducing today's speakers and leading the discussion, I would like to formally introduce him. Dr. Subham Amin is currently serving as an assistant professor in the Department of English, Sri Ramakrishna Sarda Vidya Mahapitha. He earned his PhD from the Department of English, the Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of Baroda, Vadodara. His areas of research include queer studies, Victorian fiction, Gothic novels, and Vajrayana Buddhism. He has authored a book and has also contributed several articles to edited volumes and reputed journals. With this, I am pleased to hand over the session to Dr. Subham Amin. Over to you, Subham.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Neeraj, for this kind introduction. And so today we are going to have a session on the Melow Musings. And the title of today's session, as Dr. Neeraj has already pointed out, that from slopes to the sips, a journey through Darjeeling tea and terrain. So, as we know that the flavor of Darjeeling tea, it's not only has its famous and is renowned for its fragrance, for its delightful taste throughout the world, but at the same time, it has several cultural connotations. And it has an integral connection with the colonial history of India and especially the colonial history of West Bengal. Now, today, this particular issue, this particular topic will be introduced and will be elaborated to you by one of the renowned scholars of this field, Dr. Pradipta Shyam Chowdhary. I have this immense pleasure to introduce him to you. Dr. Pradipta Shyam Chowdhary, who is at present an assistant professor in the Department of English, North Bengal University of North Bengal. Dr. Pradipta Shyam Chowdhary, he actually needs no introduction because many of you are already aware, acquainted with him, know him very well. Now he began his research career as a scholar of partition literature, but now at present he is mostly engaged in research in the areas of queer studies, gender studies, masculinity studies, and cultural studies. And especially as a friend of Pradipto, I know him. He's usually fascinated with things like tea. He has a fascination for that, and he's actually a connoisseur of the tea, has several flavors and how they taste, how to have them. He's actually, and he becomes an expert. The as long as he shifted to the North Bengal and the North Bengal University. And also, he is a passionate, I mean, like, I'm just not giving a very formal introduction. Like, he's very passionate about his gym, his sense of fashion, and he's more engaged with these topics, like these cultural studies, what we call cultural studies, like the fashion, the food, the song, the culture, the music, and all these. I mean, especially he has a fondness for food. So we are going to have a discussion with Dr. Pradipta Shyam Chowdhary, and he will be speaking about. He'll be exploring the history of the tea plantation in Darjeeling, and also the very economic and cultural factors which actually were responsible or which accelerated the very inception and the development of the tea estates. And these tea estates, I think those of us are from Bengal or from even in the eastern part of India, many of us, we know that this in 19th century and early 20th century, so many Bengalis, they're very fond of, I mean, rich Bengali people, they're very fond of having a tea garden of their own. So that became a very symbol of the class and status. And now I'm owner of the tea estate. I have a bungalow in the tea estate. So this very with the shifting paradigms of culture, the Bengali culture, the tea becomes a symbol as well as a motif in the late 19th and early 20th century literature and late 19th, early 20th century culture. So this fascinating aspects or this paradigm shift of the Bengali culture is going to be explored by Dr. Pradipta Shyam Chowdhary. I would now request Dr. Chowdhary to please deliver uh, his talk on the tea estates and the history of the tea plantation in Darjeeling. And I hope all of you will be enjoying that, of course. So over to you, Pradipta. Please unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Am I audible? Am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah. A very good evening to all of you and all the participants in Melow Music. At the very outset, I would like to thank Melow Music for giving me this stage to share my ideas with you, and very uh, thanks and love and best wishes for Subham Amin for his kind introduction. Thank you, Ishtiaque and Professor Pizar and Jaita ma'am giving me the scope to speak on Darjeeling tea. So as Shubham already mentioned, the title of my talk, that is Slum Soaps to the Streets, the journey through Darjeeling tea and terrain. Please first change the slide. So my discussion would start with a quotation from J. Kohler when he writes in his book Darjeeling, History of the World's Greatest Tea, that it is more than merely a drink. And you can see that apart from calling it an energizer, a marker of time, and a measure of it present at the most quotidian moments of daily life, Kohler calls that it is more celebrated as just it is more celebrated than crop. It is the history and politics of India and Britain and the rise of colonialism. So if we look at the observation of Kohler, this underscores the economic, political, and the cultural importance of tea to the British Raj in India. And it also focuses on the magical power of this beverage that ultimately becomes an important part of Indian life. Now, tea is a plantation crop that was introduced by the British East India Company in various parts of Assam, Nilgiri Hills, and Darjeeling. Interestingly, please change the slide. The same plants brought up in different regions of the country yield different flavors and aromas. Please change the slide. If Assam tea is full-bodied and rich in flavor, the Nilgiri tea is characterized by its briefly aromatic freshness, and the magic of Darjeeling tea lies in its fine balance between the flavor and the liquor. Now, the romantic aura, if you call it a romantic aura of Darjeeling tea, I call it is like the elusiveness of the muscatel, which is very hard to define, and it is a category that cannot be categorized. If we change the slide, if cognac reminds us of France, Darjeeling brings into mind the freshly brewed second flush muscatel flavored tea. Like the best French extra old cognac, which is blended in a finer balance from several edelweiss or fruit brandy, which is produced using fermentation and distillation. The Darjeeling tea is also produced through several processing stages where human touches play a very pivotal role than technology. If the magic of cognac lies in the blending skill of the blend master, the fine balance of the Darjeeling tea lies in the special plucking skill, which in Nepali we say doi pate suiro, or two leaves and a bud, and of the planters and the nose of the tea tasters. Now please change the slide, next slide. The magic of the Darjeeling tea is its unique quality, which is the gift of the terroir, or what we say the unique combination of the climate, soil, topography of the place, which was teamed up with the exigency of the British colonial administration to find a suitable hill station, next slide, for the rest and recuperation of the British soldiers. Next slide, please. The excruciating summer temperatures, along with the tropical diseases, were actually cutting short the lifespan of the British soldiers, whose number increased after the Sepoy Mutiny in 1857. Now, the mutiny ended the British East India Company's control in India, leading to full British government control over the country. Now, in the second half of the 19th century BC, that the British government began constructing sanatoriums and settlements for the ailing English soldiers and civil servants in various mountainous regions of India. As a result, several hill stations such as Shimla, Uti, Darjeeling, Airport, Almora, and Ranikhet were established throughout the country. Now, besides this health considerations, there was also an important political and cultural factor that you don't need to change the slide now. This is okay. Okay, keep it. Okay, I'll tell you to change. Now, the factor that contributed to the development of this hill station. Now, in the pre-mutiny era, the relationship between the colonizers and the colonized was more assimilated. However, this changed after 1857. Following the mutiny, the British rulers strategically maintained a social and cultural distance from their Indian subjects. Next slide. Now, I'll show you how Jan Morris comments that the British rulers were actually celestially withdrawn from the Indian millions on the plains below, and they lived a few months in the year entirely for themselves. Jan Morris writes this in Heaven's Command. Now, the hill stations gave them the climate and the required aloofness, which made them feel that India had receded from their lives. The hilly climate also reminded them of their English homes. Next slide, please. The hill stations, next slide, please. The hill stations gave them the required aloofness, I told you, which made them feel, and this hilly climate also reminded them of their English homes. Now, these hill stations were built after the idyllic English or Scottish villages, which was a sort of walking back home experience for the British officials and soldiers posted in India. Kohler describes the hill stations as churches with Gothic edifices, stained glass and bell towers, bandstands for concerts and strident military tunes, and mall limited to pedestrians and horses for strolling. Next slide, please. Now, along with this, the clubs that were actually founded by the British government were also an important part of the British colonial system. Now, the beginning of these clubs goes back to the empire that eventually became emblematic of the aloofness that Jan Morris mentions. Next slide, please. These clubs were considered the center of what? Of the British imperialism. Now, if you look at if you look in literature, you will find that Orwell in Barnage Days, this next slide, please. Orwell in Barnage Days comments, in any town in India, the European club is the spiritual citadel, the real seat of the British power. We also get the writings of Leonard Woolf, who was the husband of Virginia Woolf. He was posted as an administrator in Ceylon for several years, and he observed that the clubs I've written have normally a curious air of slight depression, but at the same time, exclusiveness, superiority, and isolation. Now, following this, the Calcutta Bengal Club was the first English club. That was the first English club that was founded in Kolkata in the year 1827, following which the Madras Club and the Baikula Club of Bombay were established in 1832 and 1833, respectively. After the Sepoy Mutiny in 1857, almost all the British stations have clubs. The emphasized adjectives that I have said, the exclusiveness, superiority, and isolation that actually Leonard Woolf has written, these emphasized adjectives best describe the socio-cultural implications of these clubs during the colonial days. Moreover, the post-mutiny political situation was also instrumental in maintaining a distance between the Indians and the British, which the clubs as the exclusive citadels offered. Now, next slide, please. The Darjeeling Planters Club was established in 1868 following the same imperial policy, and it was in a piece of land that was donated by the Maharaja of Cooch Behar. Now, this club was a place of retreat and a social hub for the British planters who lived a lonely life in the sprawling bungalows of the tea estates. The story of Darjeeling tea came with the British, who took a simple plantation industry, next slide please, to an exclusive level of cultural statement. Next slide. Okay, leave this. Okay. The cultural statement, a sophisticated colonial lifestyle, and overall a unique brand identity of the hill station, Darjeeling, which grew up as the queen of the hills. Next slide. So if we look into, next slide please, if we look into the history of Darjeeling as well as the geography of Darjeeling, you will find that they go hand in hand with the story of tea. Now, its journey, how actually the history of tea moved from the terroirs to the teacups. Now, before we delve into the essence and evolution of Darjeeling tea and its culture, let us talk about the history. So it was actually the English traders who first smuggled tea from China and later planted them in the fields of its colonies like India and Ceylon. Now, there is an exciting story of the arrival of tea in England. In the year 1848, the British East India Company asked Robert Fortune, a Scotch botanist, to steal the secret of tea cultivation and production. Now, Fortune engaged in a daring act of corporate espionage, and he ventured into the Wuxishan Hills, a forbidden place for the foreigners in China, and finally brought tea to England. Practically, there was no tea gardens in Darjeeling before the English arrived. Hence, the history of Darjeeling grew up as the British hill station and the summer retreat for the British officials who brought tea plantations in Darjeeling. It has already been mentioned that the favorable climate of the place, temperature ranging from 5 to 15 degrees centigrade, made it an apt place to establish a sanatorium for the ailing British soldiers posted in Bengal and the adjacent provinces. Now, if we look into the Anglo-Gorkha War, it is very much connected with the history of Darjeeling, which was fought between 1814 to 1816. Next slide. The East India Company signed a treaty with the King of Sikkim in 1817 and returned a few thousand square miles of the reclaimed territory from the Gorkhas to the Sikkim Raja, guaranteeing his sovereignty over it. Now, if we see that how Kohler writes that Actually, the British wanted a 40-mile wide buffer zone between Nepal and Bhutan because the English rulers never wanted that Nepal and the kingdom of Sikkim, they have a very good relationship so they can unite and resist the British imperial power. So what happened? They worked as a mediator between the problem that was happening between this Gorkha land and the king of Sikkim. Now the king of Sikkim was Tibetan, while the subjects were mostly lectures, which often resulted in internal frictions, I told you. Now, when one of the lecture leaders was assassinated by the king, the leader's followers fled to Nepal and sought support. This was followed by several raids by Nepal, which drew the attention of the company. And what happened? We see in other cases also, the East India Company intervenes and arbitrates according to the article of the treaty, and it also deploys Captain George Lloyd and J.W. Grant, who spent 6 days at a place called Darjeeling. Now, next slide, please. Joseph Hooker, in his Himalayan diaries, writes the experience that George Lloyd and J.W. Grant writes in their diary, and later they send a report to the then Governor General Lord Bentinck. And how Hooker writes, I've written here that the observer is struck with the precision and sharpness of their outlines. He is talking about the snowy flanks. He is talking about the glowing hues reflected in orange, gold, and ruby from clouds illumined by the sinking or rising sun. So this is the description that Hooker writes about that how George Lloyd and J.W. Grant, they described Darjeeling when they first went there. Now, being struck by the beauty of this place, the British officials wrote encouraging reports about the place to the then Governor General of India, Lord Bentinck, who will later form the Tea Committee in 1834. Now, the company at the time, upon looking for a suitable place to build a sanatorium for the soldiers, they were looking for that. Now, upon receiving this report from Lloyd and Grant, next slide, please, Bentinck took the initiative to occupy Darjeeling from the king of Sikkim. Now, here I have given an excerpt from the Bengal District Gazette here, where we find that the Sikkim Raja, he actually gives this place of land out of friendship for the state Governor General, and Darjeeling is a present to the East India Company, a gift to the East India Company. Next slide, please. If Grant and Lloyd were, next slide. Okay. If Grant and Lloyd were the discoverers of Darjeeling, another Scottish civil surgeon, Dr. Archibald Campbell, was the architect who gave shape to the hill stations of Darjeeling, along with its sanatoriums, hotels, marketplaces, jail, and also the judicial system. It was Dr. Campbell who first planted the first tea plant in this garden. In 1853, what happened? The company inspector reported that the tea plants in Campbell's garden were doing well. Now, Tushar Kanti Ghosh, very good research on tea gardens of West Bengal, he notes that Campbell, in a report dated 28 April 1853, mentioned that approximately there were 2,000 tea plants ranging in age from 12 years to a few months old seedlings were growing at elevations between 2,000 and 7,000 feet. So that was the report that was given about the garden of Dr. Archibald Campbell. Okay, so at the behest of Dr. Campbell, what happens? That Robert Fortune, who smuggled tea from China, he personally came to Darjeeling and opined that Darjeeling was a place suitable for the cultivation and production of tea. So why? Because the misty climate, the high altitude, and the landform of the place were instrumental in successful thriving of the Chinese stock that Fortune smuggled from China. So the company anticipated the scopes of profit in tea plantation and started promoting it. Next slide, I'll show you how actually Darjeeling developed as a place of tea gardens. So the first commercial garden was planted out in 1852 at Sukhwar by Captain Misson. And later we had Saint Hill, which comes from the Stone Valley, and again Makai Bari, Pandey, Jean, Ambutia, Takda, Food Sharing, and many more. Now, the first factory opened on Makai Bari on 1859. So, next slide, please. If we look at the journey of tea in Darjeeling, that started with setting up a good number of tea gardens, producing tea of the highest order that became the brand Darjeeling tea. Now, the cultivation and production of tea in Darjeeling was unique not only because of its emphasis on quality and not only on quantity, but also for the tea culture, which was the gift of the British imperial legacy. Next slide, please. Now, next slide. The English tea culture generally includes the cultivation, brewing, serving, consumption, aesthetics, and also the ceremonial aspect associated with tea. Now, this culture encompasses not only how tea is consumed, but also how tea drinkers engage with the beverage. Next slide. Additionally, tea culture is intertwined with the aesthetics of tea drinking, the tea time, the utensils used, the way it is served, and the food that team up with tea. Now, the British culture of tea drinking has a long history. Next slide, please. Agnes Repplier, in her book To Think of Tea, writes, it was natural and in some sort commendable that Dr. Johnson should have given 1666 as the year in which tea made its most auspicious entry into England. So it was far more before we had the tea gardens in Darjeeling. So England was associated with tea from 1666, Repplier says. Now, one of Pape's diary entries also mentions the coming of tea in England, and by the end of the 17th century, the East India Company was controlling the import of tea in England. The tea houses in England were opened following the coffee and chocolate houses, and soon tea became a big business, and the rulers started levying harsh taxes on it, as you know. So this not only made tea unaffordable to the common people, but also instigated the smuggling of tea, which resulted in the venture of Robert Fortune, sponsored by the East India Company. Now, across the Atlantic, tea may be considered the catalyst that accelerated, accelerated the American independence movement, which reached its zenith with the Boston Tea Party. Now, the history of the reception of tea in England points to the popularity of tea in the English society that accepted tea drinking as a favorite pastime for the high society. Now, the English culture of tea drinking is associated with the afternoon, the period between noon and sunset. Now, the concept of English afternoon tea came with Anne Maria, the seventh Duchess of Bedford, who was also the lady in waiting to Queen Victoria. Now, Anne wanted to have a little pick-me-up between the long gaps of breakfast and dinner, which was the English standard of 2 meals a day in the early 19th century. Generally, next slide please, generally the tea was served on high tables accompanied by sandwiches, scones, Victoria sponge cake, clotted cream, lemon tarts, lemon tart, and butter shortbread. Now, this elaborate afternoon tea arrangement organized by the woman later transitioned from private spaces to the drawing rooms of fashionable households. So while the men frequented the clubs and pubs, the women found a unique sense of community and connection in these afternoon tea parties that provided them with a private space to socialize and bond. Now, Kohler, while commenting on the afternoon tea culture, writes that, next slide please, starting in 1865, the luxurious Langham Hotel on London's Regent Street opened and began offering afternoon tea in their dazzling palm porch. Ladies have a place to go out together in public without risking society's moralizing gossips. Now, you will find that this connection between tea culture and the question of woman liberation is also associated. Now, this energizing beverage came into the life of women as a gush of fresh air, making their afternoons cheerful, along with allowing them a space of their own. Now, with the spread of the British Empire, the English East India Company found that though tea as a beverage has become a popular like coffee, the soil of England is not pertinent for the proper cultivation of tea. Naturally, they were looking for the apt soils in their colonies and subsequently found Ceylon, the Nilgiri Hills, the Assam, and later the Darjeeling Hills as the fittest places for tea plantation. Precisely, if we look at the imperial administrative strategy of building hill stations for their soldiers combined with the commercial need of tea plantation, which actually was ultimately the political agenda behind this formation or the foundation of Darjeeling by the British imperial government. Now, next slide, please. The traditional British uh, the traditional British settlers, well known for preserving their cultural and ancestral legacies, often brought their homeland's culture and lifestyle with them to their new settlements. As a result, the tea culture was introduced to Darjeeling and other tea growing regions by the British settlers. The tea gardens of the hill stations of British colonies like Ooty and Darjeeling became the replica of London. In Darjeeling, hotels like the Elgin or the famous Windermere Hotel at the Observatory Hills are famous places that still maintain the tea culture brought with the British imperial rule. They remind us of Henry James's lines on the afternoon tea in the Portrait of a Lady, where he writes that under certain circumstances there are few hours in life more agreeable than the hour dedicated to the ceremony known as the afternoon tea. Now, the Elgin Hotel, which was actually the summer palace of the Maharaja of Coach Bihar, or the Windermere Hotel, still religiously maintains the ceremonial grandeur of the English afternoon tea. Next slide, please. Uh, at the Elgin, tea is served by turbaned and uniformed waiters on heavy thick-wood wooden tables. They pour out the fine margarette soap, Putabong or Makai Bari in monogram cups and saucers, accompanied by silverware served in theorems. Next slide, please. Hotel Windermere, next slide. Hotel Windermere started as the other villa, the oldest boarding house that hosted the elite classes of Kolkata, including the kings, queens, aristocrats, and high-level government diplomats. And lastly, the planters also. A group of local businessmen later turned the villa into a heritage hotel in 1939. Now, history says that Mrs. Gertrude Bearpark, who hailed from Windermere of the famous Lake Districts of England, was one of the shareholders. The Windermere Hotel got its name from the Windermere Hotel set in the Lake Districts by replacing the ER with a A. The hotel is still run in a similar way with its old English boarding houses were run. Now, Windermere Hotel, next slide please, serves afternoon tea. It serves the afternoon tea along with the famous scones and clotted cream. Along with the heritage hotels, there are also inexpensive food stops like the Caventers at the base of the Nehru Road or the eateries, next slide, or the eateries like Glenaries. They also serve the finest Darjeeling tea with English breakfast and continental cuisine. Now, these food stops also add a different dimension to the tea culture. Whereas the Elgin or the Windermere Hotel are primarily hotels that serve in-house guests only, eateries like Caventers or the Glenaries warmly welcome everyone to experience and celebrate the tea culture of Darjeeling. Now, next slide. The imperial legacy of the tea culture that this hotel still maintain is reminiscent of the colonial days, and these elaborate arrangements that became an integral part of tea drinking are not just an expression of imperial extravaganza, but an effort to form an emotional connection with the beverage. Now, the culture of tea drinking from the time of inception was tried to focus on the human touch, which could also be seen in the very process of tea manufacturing and the processing as well. Now, next slide. Now, despite the technological advancements, tea manufacturing is still very much a human element. Starting from the plucking to the pouring of the tea into teacups, the entire journey is based on tactile power and intuition. This human touch is the key to the elusiveness of the Darjeeling tea. Now, we till now have discussed on tea culture and the culinary exclusivity of Darjeeling, and I was trying to feel the spirit of the place and the tea culture through its gastronomic characteristics that express the colonial color and smell of the British Raj. So none but the British were, next slide please. Uh, the none but the British were so much elaborate and sophisticated about their gastronomic culture, but the signs of British colonial culture are not only found in the culinary culture of Darjeeling. The social life here still retains its Englishness. This is evident. Next slide, please. These are the pictures that you find that if you go to Glenaries or Chiventers, you will be served breakfast and tea in this way. So if you look at this is evident during the Christmas at St. Andrew's Church, you will find that not only the gastronomic extravagancy or the gastronomic interest that we find in the British imperial rule, but there is also this extravaganza you will find in the social life. So this is evident. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. So this is evident during the Christmas at St. Andrew's Church, the nightlife at the Gymkhana Club or the Planters Club or the Ring Mall. Next slide. Now, again, we have to take resort to raise Satyajit Ray's Roy Bahadur, who mournfully reminiscences, they know how to live, means the British know how to live. Here, my point is not to champion the colonial rule that may hurt the nationalist sentiment, but to underline the sophistication of the English social life dipped in etiquette and decency. Okay. Now, if all these traits that make up the tourism ideology of Darjeeling, some recent changes are also appearing in the social matrix of the place. The colonial trend is slowly supplanted by the corporatized, or to be more specific, the Americanized tourism idioms. These changes are the natural corollary of the globalization and the neo-colonial imperatives, and therefore they are very obvious. They are not only encroaching the English space of this small hill town, but at the same time changing its social matrix. So this neoliberal hurls are affecting the sophistication and the inherent etiquette of the Englishness of Darjeeling. Here, my objective is not to criticize the changes in the social patterns of Darjeeling. That are bringing certain changes in its tourism discourse, but I'm trying to analyze these changes and their effects. Now, we have seen that there was KFC that has been opened in front of Glenaries. That can be taken as a significant threat to the Englishness of Darjeeling. A customer in KFC must be missing the etiquette and the style with which the livery bearers serve you the sausages with the English master. The mixed basket of fried chicken or French fries with ketchup and coke cannot be equal with the chicken meatloaf platter with omelette that I have shown already. The Americanized tourism ideology misses that exclusivity and elegance that the tables of Glenaries or Planters Club or Chiventers have served for all these years. Now, Darjeeling has also started tasting pizza and pasta thanks to Pizza Hut, but the greatest blow that has come from is the Cafe Coffee Day at the mall. Standing in front of the wooden rooms of the Charlotte's Hotel or the Habib Malik Studio and the Oxford Bookstore, this coffee outlet is adulterating the ambience of the place itself. A lot can happen over a cup of coffee. That goes the tagline of Cafe Coffee Day. Actually, coffee was already there in Darjeeling, but that corporatized liberal attitude that was absent. The decency of the old footsteps of the place is getting replaced by informality and openness, and the self-service and the token system of Pizza Hut or KFC are far away from the elegance and sophistication found in the dinner table of the Planters Club or the Gymkhana. But the marks of the British colonial legacy are still present in these traditional restaurants and hotels. Please, next slide. Next slide, please. Uh, so you will find that this traditional hotels and restaurants, they still gain this legacy, and this legacy reminds us of people like Mrs. Pradipta Doctor. She was the ex-professor of English at Moderator College. Now she and her class can still feel the pulse of Darjeeling that Satyajit Ray wanted to frame in his films and a good number of stories. Now a close friend of Ray, who was an oftener in a flat at Ashok Mansion in Darjeeling, she carried this English legacy of Darjeeling for her whole life. Mrs. Doctor has seen the onslaught of changes in the place. She missed the old charm of the place. But the only thing she says, I don't miss in this old age is the cold. How could Darjeeling retain that coldness and the English home weather against the global warming? Does it remain unaffected? It can be perceived from the words of Mrs. Doctor that the cold weather is associated with the English space that this hill town has created as its mark of identity. Recent weather reports point to the steady rise of temperature in the towns of Darjeeling, Kashiang, Kalimpong during summer. Some hotels in these places are even planning to install fans and air conditioners. But the English summer is still present in these colonial spaces where people like Mrs. Pratibha Datta inhabits. The English space sits from Darjeeling Sea, which is called the SHCGOP, play billiards in the Gymkhana Club, or have their dinners by the wooden fireside in the Windermere Hotel. Now, the question that comes up with the sudden changes in the social life of Darjeeling is how it is affecting the tourism pattern of this hill town. Till now, I was pointing the need of preserving the colonial space that makes the cultural identity of Darjeeling. But from the perspective of tourism business, this encroachment of the neoliberal tourism ideology has made the tourist spot Darjeeling more accessible. Darjeeling no longer remains a vacation destination for the aristocratic Bengali class, but a hill-to-own tourist spot where people who don't know the difference between first class or second class or are unaware of the breakfast delicacies of Keventers are coming to enjoy their holidays. Maybe this class is not conscious about the rich cultural or historical legacy of the place. They know Darjeeling only from Rajesh Khanna's Aradhana or Ranbir Kapoor's Barfi, but their presence is supporting the tourism economy of the place. More tourists, more profit, and more development. That is the bottom line of tourism business of any tourist spot. Darjeeling can be no exception. The uncharted space inhabited by the common people in Darjeeling stay outside. Next slide, please. The English space created by the colonial legacy. These common people need food. Next slide. These common people, they need food, they need shelter and security for their daily lives, which largely depends upon the steady supply of tourists. Their economic needs find no difference between people like Satyajit Ray's Roy Bahadur staying in the Windermere Hotel and a group of college students staying at the budget hotel and enjoying their trips with less booze. Next slide. Next slide. Now, the changing pattern of tourism may be restructuring the colonial space of Darjeeling. Next slide, please. But at the same time, it is strengthening the economic activities by opening the space to the cosmopolitan class. Unlike the colonial legacy that always tries to maintain status quo and class distinction, this neoliberal tourism ideology takes up the principle of informality and familiarity to invite more. Therefore, quantitative parameters become similarly important like that of the qualitative. To be precise, a steady economic system has to put equal emphasis on both these parameters for intensive and extensive development. The development of Darjeeling does not solely depend upon the beautification of the mall or the maintenance of the colonial architectures. They are important, but more important is the extensive development of the extensive development of the common people. Therefore, the corporatized American tourism ideology may be encroaching upon the colonial space of Darjeeling and adulterating its heritage, but if it can bring a sustainable development by strengthening the tourism business, the change is welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradipta, for this extremely enlightening discourse on the cultural connotations, the history, and the development of the tea as a not only as an industry but also as a cultural emblem that defines the Darjeeling and the region of North Bengal. So now I think we should move on to the interactive session where the questions, comments, feedback, everything is important. So I'd request the audience, the listeners who are present, the esteemed audience present over here. If you have any question, any comment, any observation on Dr. Pradipta Shyam Chowdhary's lecture, if you have any question, any comment for Pradipta, so I'd request you to go ahead with that.
Yes, let's hear something from the audience. Pradipta, that was really very interesting. But it's not fair. You talk about such interesting things, and well, you seem to know Darjeeling like the back of your hand, and that is one place I've always longed to go to. So I think we should plan something in Darjeeling very soon. Anyway, it was a great talk, and I can see your passion in the subject that you're dealing with. But we have a lot of people logged in. Let's see what they would have to say. Yes. Come on, switch on your videos, please. Let's have some discussion, and afterwards we're going to have a chat. Any questions for Pradipta? Any clarifications that you want?
Can I ask something, ma'am?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you for this lecture. This was really great.
Ishtiaque, you need to unmute yourself.
No, I can hear him very well.
Can you hear me?
Subham? 1 minute. Subham,
Ishtiaque, I think your sound is...
Is it okay now?
Subham, you can take the questions in the background if there are any.
Type your question as well.
Okay. Should I continue if you can hear me, sir? Can you hear me now?
You can, if there's a problem with sound, you can.
Can you hear me now, sir?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Yeah, I was just wondering, from the times of the British colonial period when tea was introduced in India, I mean, the colonial period is over now, but the whole issue with the tea estates is very much colonial, The only difference is the takeover of the state from, either land or, maybe some private entities are handling it. But the whole system, even in Assam, it's very colonial till now. Still now we have the Bagani culture, right? The Bagani people, the caste and the class, the Bagani class as well. And still now we have those people who are, doubly and triply marginalized. What like say something about that, sir? The whole.
Yeah, that is a very pertinent question that you have raised, yeah. But this tea garden still retains certain colonial administrative measures, which you can point out as something which is not actually good for the workers working over there. Because if you look at the various tea gardens in West Bengal or in other places in Assam, also you will find that this year also West Bengal is having a problem with the bonus, the festival bonus. and there is a sort of a political problem that has raised along the percentage of the honors that were supposed to be paid to the voters. That is a very pertinent issue regarding the tea gardens. But the problem, uh, actually, I just wanted to discuss in this particular presentation is about the tea culture. Now, when you talk of tea culture, when you talk of the production of tea, this particular production process of tea, it is something very human extensive. Okay, this is very much labor extensive. So you need more labor engagement in this work. There where this kind of marginalization, there where this kind of social distance between the English masters and the workers working in the tea gardens, which generally you don't think in these days, but it reached a different level now. Now this kind of exploitation, labor exploitation, is done not by the British masters, but by the Indian owners who own. And nowadays, what happens? At one point of time, there were actually small gardens owned by either Indians or owned by any British company or something. Now, what happens? Just like Brookbond or other holding companies, they are actually taking control of all the individual gardens and they're making a brand of tea. Now, Brookbond has a huge number of tea gardens in Darjeeling. They have also certain tea gardens in Assam. Now, when these holding companies are controlling the tea business, the exploitation reaches a different level. In my discussion, in my first part of the discussion, I talked about the history of tea, how actually tea was brought in India and how this culture has grown and how Darjeeling as a tourist spot became much more favorite to the tourists because of its tea culture. Along with that, my argument was on the particular point that was that how this particular tea culture or tea tourism, if I call it tea tourism, this is actually related to the common people living in Darjeeling. I'll just give you an example. If you go to Darjeeling, you will find that there are big tea rooms and tea shops, tea boutiques also, like the Golden Tapes and many other tea rooms are there in Darjeeling. Now, they actually serve very expensive tea. A cup of tea will cost you 200 rupees or 300, even 500 rupees also. Now, along with this, if you walk around that mall area, this and small tea shops, and
There's a lot of crackling sound. There's a lot of crackling sound coming from your side.
The voice was breaking. Voice was breaking. You may have to.
There seems to be some problem that side. But we got your point. Yeah, we got your point, and we understand what you're trying to say. Just switch off your audio for a while. Let's see if the cracking stops. No, it's still going on. It has stopped, huh? The cracking has stopped now. All right. So who had asked that question?
Name.
Ishtiaque, you?
Yeah, yes.
Any observations that you might have, the others on the screen? Shubham, would you like to add something? Yeah, yes.
Yes, ma'am. Just I have a kind of question for Pradipta. For example, like in the so many Bengali thrillers of the post-colonial period, what we noticed is that like there are those fictions which have their setting, Darjeeling as their setting. Every time there is a problem that starts with the tea garden. Like the detective goes over there, some problems in the tea garden, perhaps some kind of mysterious things are happening over there. So I'm a kind of every fiction there is the problem is that like these in that particular those fictions we find that this tea gardens becomes the locale. I mean they become the locale for any kind of disorder or chaos that is actually
Yes,
emerging in that particular area. So, can we say that this very disorder which is happening in the tea garden that actually symbolizes the very cultural change that is happening in the post-colonial period, which is related to the very decline in the tea industry and the very culture which actually grew with the tea industry in the colonial
mm,
period?
mm, mm, mm. Yeah. So, thank you, Shubham, for this observation. It's more like an observation. So, actually, what happens when we look at a tea garden, na, so tea gardens appear to be very mysterious. Some when the tourists go to Darjeeling and when they cross tea gardens, when they start seeing the tea gardens, there are slopes of the hill slopes full of tea trees and the tea gardens. They find it something very mysterious. Now, when there is mystery, there is sort of a magic. And when people from the plain lands, they go to the hills, they find the slope of land with green trees, and then where women are plucking tea leaves. They find that this is not something which comes within the very common cultural, and that's why what happens when you find certain mysteries or certain thrillers, you will find that the tea gardens come up as a locale for certain mysteries that are happening. And still, in a very common nowadays, I've seen a series in Hoichoi that was a murder in the hills. So when you find that the murder is happening, it is something associated with a closed tea garden, and there will be a bungalow of planters. And the planter, if it is belongs to the colonial period, the planter will be an Englishman. He will be very, what to say, very rough and very exploiting English planters. And there are the common laborers who are exploited, and so many things happen. Even there was a very famous Bengali movie, and that was acted by Uttam Kumar. That was also related to that is a tea garden area. That is Neeraj Tamang, isn't it? So there we also
And
have
also just Pradipta, just
two
to add,
types of
this fictions by Samoresh Mojumdar, this very Bengali
uh,
fictions actually kind of
exactly.
depicted in the very tea gardens of Jalpaiguri and
Exactly. So that has got yeah. Please. You are talking of that Kalbala Kalpurush. Yeah. So that has got a different history because Shamoresh Majumdar, those novels were actually associated with the Nakshal movement. And the Nakshal movement actually originated from a place in North Bengal, the Nakshalbari, which is very close to our university. That's a place called Nakshalbari and Kashideva. And Charu Majumdar was one of the proponents of the Nakshal movement in West Bengal, who actually came from North Bengal. So what happened that Nakshal movement and these tea gardens. So these tea gardens are very mysterious places. So a man can easily hide in one of the busties in tea garden, one of these places in tea gardens, and the police it becomes very hard job for the police to find somebody who hides in the tea garden. That's why this tea gardens. I told you that tea culture, tea garden, the terroir of tea, the terrain of tea, all these are very elusive. All these are very magical. All they actually have a lot of mystery in them. And that even you find in the very flavor of tea. The Darjeeling tea flavor is called the muscatel. It is a very unique combination of the musk and the astringent, which cannot you cannot categorize that this flavor is like this flavor is like that. There is a mystery, there is a magic.
right. Thank you, Pradipta. And if you have any of you have any question or anything else, comments, observation.
Is there anyone who would like to say something? Come on.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Bhakti, yes, you
Yeah,
are.
you are able. Hi.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm a bit curious in terms of this whole history of colonization, and even Ghosh says that there was a big political colonial agenda behind bringing tea to
Huh,
India
huh, huh.
and all those stuff. Now, like when we it was very interesting to know the whole tea culture as you discussed, because I had read about it from the colonial point of view and post-colonial viewpoints against it. But
Huh,
sir,
huh, huh.
I was just curious. One, to know what is the role that women, because when we from our side of India we watch or read about tea gardens, it's shown as very exotic place where women work, and so there is this whole discussion on women and their role on the tea garden or in the tea gardens. And secondly, I was also thinking about the issue of development, because when tourism overshoots, there is always this impact on the place. So all over the
Hmm.
India, that has become a point of discussion these days, that because of these influencers and this whole discussion on uh, marketing of tourist spots. So what
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
the position of tea vis-a-vis Darjeeling in terms of today's influencers culture and tea culture?
You are talking about the role of the women. What is it?
Role
What
of women and
exactly?
the impact of influencing or influencer culture on social media, and its impact on Darjeeling, if it is there.
Okay. So your question, if I want to answer your question, I have to focus on two things. One, the role of the women who work in the tea gardens
Yes, sir. Yes,
as the
please.
tea
Yes.
as the plucking laborers. Okay.
Yes.
If
Yes.
I need
Yes.
to talk about this, if I need to talk about the social, political, as well as the cultural locations of the tea pluckers in the tea gardens, I need another hour to discuss, because exploitations of the tea workers, of basically the women, they come from various areas, from various angles. They are exploited economically, they are exploited sexually, they were rather exploited sexually by certain groups of people, they were exploited socially also. You will find that a woman working in a tea garden from very long, from the very inception of tea gardens in India, a man working in the tea garden and a woman working in a tea garden, both are laborers. The women get a lesser wage than the male workers. This is one point. There were the sexual exploitations also that you will find in various literature. And there were also political exploitations. There you will find that this women tea pluckers not only come from the local areas of Darjeeling, they were actually at one point of time, and sometimes we find till nowadays, I cannot give you exact proof for that, but trafficking happens in the tea gardens. And it actually started from the very inception of the tea gardens, because these workers can work at a very low wage rate. You will find there was a regional song where a woman is actually complaining because she has been taken from her Southern Pargana areas to the tea gardens of Assam, and at a very low wage rate. And she finds this life very hard, and she finds that how she is exploited. And there we see that the babu is actually exploiting him, the sardar is actually exploiting him, and the planter sexually exploits her at night. So that is a different that actually will take a lot of time to speak about the condition of women in the tea gardens. But nowadays, if you look at the present scenario, things are changing. Women are getting their due respect. They are getting a smart wage, but that is not enough compared to the present market rate. Some now the government has also introduced things like insurance policies for the tea workers. And apart from this, if you look at Darjeeling as a tourist spot, you will find that the business is run, the shops, the local woolen shops, the tea shops are basically run by the local women, and they're very hardworking. If I don't know how many of you have visited Darjeeling, but if you go there, there will be a local market. You can find a local market called the Mahakal market, which actually is a very good place for buying your woolens. You will find that most of the sellers have. Now, why do they come to this business? They are profiting. They are getting money. They can manage their livelihood with this. So things are changing, but a more we require something more to bring into the proper line of development.
Thank you, Pradipta, for
Thank you, sir.
for the discourse, and thank you, audience, for your questions, comments, observations.
Renuka had something to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
It is related to the latter part of Bhakti's question, I think so, because the aura of the many of the places, that is the tea plantation, is mainly because of the colonial background, and the people visit it because of that reason. What do you have to say about retaining that aura in the present times in the ecological, if we see it from the ecological perspective,
From the
from the
so
ecological
that
environment, like people are.
okay. No, actually, there are two things. You can retain this aura that we find in the imperial during the British time, that see how it was served and how people used to go to these hotels. So that is important. But along with this, there should be introduction of certain uh, business policies and certain tourism enterprises that will actually develop and that will bring development for the common people of Darjeeling. That's why I said that you will find big tea rooms in Darjeeling where they serve tea at 200 rupees or 500 rupees per cup. And you also have the common people selling wonderful masala tea around the Chaurasta for just rupees 10 or rupees 20. So both these things are important because if we completely do away with the imperial tea culture that was there, it will be just a sort of we will just forget our past because we cannot ignore, we cannot do away with the past of how tea came and what was there. So tourism should be more inclusive. The tourism economy should be more inclusive. It should have places for the rich people who will come and who have no problem with spending 10,000 or 15,000 rupees for a day. And there will be also scope for the common people to come and enjoy Darjeeling. That's why there should be a good combination of the budget tourism as well as the exclusive and aristocratic tourism. That actually makes a good tourism statement for a place, for a tourist spot. That is my idea.
Actually, we should have some people from tourism listening to you. That would be so good for everyone, especially for tourism in that sector. Yeah. When the recording is ready, perhaps you can pass on the link to the concerned people.
Okay.
And when you were talking about, the ritual of having afternoon tea, the ceremonial culture.
Yeah.
I was reminded of a time when having tea was different from the way it is taken today. We used to have a proper. Do you know what tea cozies are? I'm sure the younger generation does not know what tea cozies are. But 50 years ago, we used to have tea cozies. There used to be something called a tea roll in which you put the tea leaves and you put in. So it was a very nice ritual kind of thing, and every family had a silver tea set. And every girl was given away in marriage was given that silver tea set because it was a ritual that would continue from one family to another. But what do we have now? We have that dip tea, or we have pre-mixes. We are in that fast forward mode, and that old ritual is forgotten. Even the sandwiches, for instance, the sandwiches that are served with tea. Now, when you ask for sandwich bread, you get ordinary bread. But I remember a time when you asked for sandwich bread and there would be very thinly cut slices, and there were things like sandwich covers, which were of a certain shape, which were meant specially for sandwiches. So all that is over. Henry James talked about it in his Portrait of a Lady. And T.S. Eliot, when he wrote his poem of the same title, Portrait of a Lady, he also talks about a lady who sits in her boudoir, who sits in her salon, in her drawing room. And she says, I shall sit here serving tea to my friends. So that poem, I was reminded of that poem. So that culture is now over. And if we want to have a cup of tea, we don't ritualize it. We just go and, just boil some water, put some premix and have it the quickest way possible. Yeah. But let's see if there are any other observations from the people who are logged in. Otherwise, Subham?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pradipta?
So shall we move to the vote of thanks? Okay, so thank you, Pradipta, for your enlightening presentation. Now I request Dr. Neeraj for kindly to deliver the vote of thanks.
Subham, thank you, Subham. I thoroughly enjoyed the session. Thank you, Pradipta. And for the official and formal vote of thanks, I would like to invite Ishtiaque. Ishtiaque, please.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. Okay, so thank you so much, Pradipta sir, for this discussion on tea, where you traced tea as a cultural phenomena, and then you talked about the gastronomical, changes, and you traced a whole evolution of tea from the colonial period. It reminds me of Amartya Sen when he writes in his idea of democracy that until and unless we have deliberations on tea stalls, democracy will be alive in this country. So I think what really decolonized tea is the infusion of milk and boiling it, not just putting milk, just boiling it with the tea. Anyways, on behalf of Melow and on behalf of all the senior and the younger Melow dignitaries, I really thank you for this wonderful lecture, and I also thank Dr. Shubham Amin for moderating this session, and also Dr. Neeraj Pizar. I hope to see you again sometime soon for this Melow lectures. And also, I thank the new Melow support group members who have joined us today, and the future ones will be joining us in the next sessions, because we approximately have around 30 to 40 new members for the Melow support group. Thank you so much, everyone, and over to ma'am.